So I have just finished 100 days of earrings. I made a pair of earrings every day for 100 days. Being newly retired, I wanted to challenge myself artistically and give myself a small goal each day. And I love making earrings. So this is my 100 day of earrings. I just used things I had around the house or found when I was out for walks, just whatever I could get my hands on. So I'm just going to give a brief description of each earring and a little bit more than the initial pictures I posted on Facebook. So I started with some maps. These were some vintage maps I got in Alaska on a recent trip. I had the pleasure of going to Alaska in the summer this year. And so the maps were just your traditional maps. So I glued them to some heavier cardboard, and then I gave them a clear coat to make them, you know, a little stronger and maybe even a little bit waterproof if you got caught in the rain with them. The second pair I made out of, they were a pair of linen pants that had pretty much seen the end of their lives, and I was going to throw them out, but I liked the linen and it was thin, and I thought I could make some flowers out of it because I'd never done that before. So I painted. I just used regular acrylic paint, and as the paint was drying, I just kept sculpting them over different things to get the shapes I wanted and adding more paint. And then when they were done, I added some little beads in the middle. These took the longest of all the earrings. These probably took, I don't know, maybe 6 hours. It was a ridiculous amount of time, but there was a lot of downtime, drying time, waiting for the paint to dry. You know, that's how you spend your time, watching paint dry. Next pair was out of a seltzer can. When I was making the previous day earrings, I left my empty can of seltzer on the sewing machine. And when I started cleaning up, I thought, well, I think I could make today's earrings out of that. So I just stuck the, cut out the circle and just laid it on top of a piece of fabric that I had used some interfacing on to kind of stiffen. And I just did quilting stitching all over the aluminum can, if you can see that. And then made the wire frame for that pair. That's a really cute pair. The next pair was also just in my sewing room, and I have a drawer next to my sewing machine that has every spool of thread color you could ever want. And I just grabbed the end of each one and pulled it out and made a big cluster of thread and decided those would be a fantastic pair of earrings. The next few pair, I was cleaning out my photo albums. I had so many photos that I had never cleaned out really, and negatives. You don't keep negatives anymore. I don't anyway. I have no desire to keep them. And I was throwing them away and I pulled them back out of the garbage. A lot of my projects have things I threw in the garbage and pulled back out. I have little dies that cut different shapes. And I love that when you hold them up to the light, you can actually kind of see some figures. You can't really make out the pictures because they're negatives, but what a great lightweight pair of earring with a little bead in between each shape. I have dies that I use all different shapes. That's what I cut out the shapes with. And then I did polyurethane the shapes before I put them together, just to give them a little extra stability. The next pair was, I used the edge of the negatives, and it has the little holes on it, and I just wove the holes through the squares, the little holes on the ends, to make that pair of earrings. The next pair is the same, the edge, using the edge of the negatives, the little square holes, and cut strips of them and just made little balls. And then the red bit on top is a piece of negative that I painted with just red spray paint. And again, this one has a coat of polyurethane, or just a clear coat. I can't remember exactly what I used on them. The next pair was a water bottle. So it was like this, the grip part, but these were just this shape, and I spray painted one side yellow and one side red, and then added a little black border to make a really fun pair of earrings. I like to use things that you wouldn't necessarily use to make earrings. And I love to see the look on people's face when they hear what the earrings are made out of. This is one of my favorites for that. Just looks like kind of a cool, maybe a Christmas tree ornament, but this one is actually made out of a tube of toothpaste. The inside of the toothpaste tube is silver. And this one, I cut a strip of it and cut little tiny slits in it and use the inside for the outside. So that's a really fun pair, super lightweight, obviously waterproof. The next pair, I went back to my recycle bin, and these are just all kinds of pieces of plastic out of my recycle bin. This one, I kind of melted just to give it a texture. It was the lid of a hairspray bottle. And these are one of my favorite pair of earrings. They're so simple and lightweight and cute. I just love them. So sticking with the theme of my recycled plastic, this was a day of cleaning out the cat food containers and putting them into resealable containers. So all the plastics bags had been thrown in the garbage on the one day. So I cut them up into little tiny pieces, and I just took some wax paper and used my iron and melted them and then cut out the shape after I had. So it's just a lightweight piece of plastic. That's kind of a fun one. The next one goes back to when I was cleaning out my photo boxes. In my photo boxes, I had all the newspaper clippings and ads I had placed when I used to own a theatrical costume rental business. And over the years, there were lots of newspaper ads, and I don't know why I had kept them, but it was time to let go of them. So I ripped them all up into little pieces, and I made some sheets of paper out of these old newspaper clippings. And I was going to make this pair of earrings, and I had had a glass of wine, and there was a tiny bit of red wine in the bottom of the glass, and I dropped one of the discs into it, and I decided I really liked the color, so all the discs went in to the red wine. This next pair, I was out on the golf course practicing, and I saw a cut up golf ball that the lawnmower had obviously run over, so I picked that up and painted it. What was hard about this one is to paint just the outside and leave the divots white. And the way I ended up achieving that was lots of trial and error, but what worked in the end was putting the paint onto a pretty firm sponge and then kind of pushing the golf ball onto that. So that's kind of a fun one. The next one, this is another one where I love to see people's reactions when they actually realize what it is. This is made out of some staples. I had borrowed a staple gun from somebody, and all the staples I had didn't fit. And when I realized that this set of staples didn't go to anything, I threw it away. And when it hit the garbage can, the noise just kind of sparked my interest, and I pulled them back out of the garbage can and was just playing with the sets of staples. And I put an elastic band, after I broke them into equal sized pieces, I put an elastic band around the outside to hold them together in the shape I wanted. And then I put some glue in. Once the glue dried, I just filled it with some paint, and that's earrings made out of old staples. The next bunch of earrings are really special to me. They're from an organ. When I grew up, my father had bought the buildings of the Esty Organ Company in Brattleboro, Vermont. And we all worked there as kids. It was just such a huge part of our life, this Esty Organ Company. And a bunch of years ago, my son Justin found an organ, an old Esty organ, at a junk shop and bought it for me. And it sat in my basement for 3 months, and he gave it to me for Christmas. And I'd walked past it. He had thrown a blanket over it. And I'd walked past it so many times and never even noticed it. And so was really, really happy when he gave it to me for Christmas. When we moved, we had to downsize, and it was during COVID, and there was just no way we could bring the organ with us, and nobody wanted an organ. And it was COVID times, and things were strange and hard, and I couldn't bring myself to just throw it away. So I took the whole organ apart And one of the things I kept were the organ keys. So this is what an organ key looks like. So this was a section of the organ key. It's got a little bit of the wood still on the back of it. And it was really hard to get these to turn. When I found that if I put them in boiling water, they were soft while they were in the water, but as soon as I took them out of the water, they hardened immediately. I ended up using my iron with a towel over it, and that method seemed to keep it pliable a little longer, but these were still really hard to get to shape, but worth the effort. The next pair is just another section of the organ key, and when I was trying to cut it, my saw slipped and I made a mark on these are made out of celluloid plastic, old plastic before they actually made plastic, and it's a lot of piano keys, older piano keys are made out of ivory. These are not ivory, these are celluloid. And so I just decided to go ahead and make a whole bunch of scratches in it and then fill it with paint and give it that almost scrimshaw look. And I just drilled a hole and put a dab of red for dramatic effect. The next pair, also really cool, part of the organ key. On an organ key, there's this, again, this is the organ key. The bottom, this is adjustable. It's got a screw in it, and it's to adjust the height, how far it goes up or down. So it's just a little piece of wood with a felt pad and a screw on the end. And when I took these out, the end of the screw, that's pretty long there, is pointy. I just went ahead and hammered the end of the screw flat and then drilled a hole in it and put 3 of them together and made an earring that way out of that little spacer on the organ. Again, one of those things where you would never recognize what it was, but it's really neat when you find out. The next pair, I love this pair. It has an Asian look to it to me, but what it is, it's the end of the piano key. It's 2 of them together, and I cut it off with the saw, 2 of them, and placed them together, and then put the wire through it to hold it together with a couple of vintage beads. And then the bit on the end is one of the black piano keys, the ebony wood, just cut in a little tiny cross section to make that key. Really love that pair. We'll get that after. This next pair is more of the piano key. So the back of the piano key only has the white going halfway. This is inside the piano. And all of the white keys were one set, and all of the black keys are another set. And when they're worked on in the factory, they must be separated at some point after they're fitted together, because both the white set and the black set were stamped with matching numbers. So I cut off, you can see what I cut off on the key, that bit with the number on it, and then used a little bit of the white key with one of the felt pads that was, there's little felt pads all over the inside of the organ to make soft landings. Put that together with that to make that little peekaboo hole. You see the red. Love this pair. So one of them was off a black key and one of them was off a white key. Next pair, to me this looks like a little church or chapel, but what it is, it's the cross section, where are we here? The cross section of the end of the piano key. So what I did was I cut it at an angle. So the inside of this key, inside there is hollow, and that's what's inside. So it's been drilled into, and then a plug is put on the end, and then the white end of the piano key is put on that. So this is a really fun, and then another felt pad from another part of the organ. I fit it in there. The next pair, Same thing, another piece of the piano key, white piano key, with a little bit of the black piano key, the ebony, and I just cut it because I didn't want it to get too heavy. I cut as much of it away as I could to give it, still keep its shape, but to make it a little bit lighter. So that one's fun. The next one is a set of just one of the ebony keys cut in half lengthwise. And then it had a little hole in the bottom of it. And I just went ahead and added a piece of the white piano key for that one. So you've got a little bit of the wood it was on and a little bit of the white piano key for just a really simple yet elegant earring. On the back of, behind the keys on an organ are all these pull keys. I don't know what they do because I don't actually know how to play an organ or much about it. They just, I guess, change the tone. But I took one and I cut it in half lengthwise and replaced it had a felt pad, but the felt pad was old and worn out. So I replaced that with a piece of red leather. And there was a white plastic disc on the end that said what the key was, but when I sawed it in half, it broke into pieces. But it left the little white bits where it had been attached. So that's kind of a fun one. The next few are, I was riding my bike the day I was making these and I got a flat tire. So my husband changed the tire for me and these were bits of the inner tube. And I knew I wanted to make a set of earrings out of the inner tube as soon as it broke, but I struggled. I folded and cut more pieces of rubber tire. I had a pile maybe 10 times this size. I used every single piece of the inner tube just to get 2 pair of earrings. To me, this one kind of reminds me of a little Japanese kimono. Has that look. And the second pair, I cut out shapes and kind of just wove them together. But this one makes me think of a little bit of a parrot sitting on a little roost. The next few are made out of vintage fabric. So when I had my costume shop, a lot of my inventory came from a costume shop that had been in business since 1902, and they had never thrown anything away, or at least it appeared that way, because there were so many things that were just disintegrated and horrible and of absolutely no use. But if there were beautiful fabric, I would save bits and pieces of the fabric. And this is some of my favorite pieces of fabric. And I just coated them all with what is it? The decoupage glue there. What's that called? Mod Podge. And then in between each piece is a thicker piece of fabric to kind of give it spacing. So these are just a few of my favorite vintage fabrics. They're all at least 100 years old. And then a couple of vintage beads on top. The next pair is one of my very favorite pieces of vintage fabric. It was from a men's bathrobe, and this is was 100% wool fabric woven in a jacquard. So each little thread is woven to make designs, and I love this one. And then to give it some to make it more sturdy, I cut out some thin leather and glued that to the back. And then once it was glued nicely and cut out, I added some, I just don't know if I used the glue or spray paint, but I hardened it. And as it was drying, that's when I shaped it. And then I added some 1920s beads just to give it a little splash of color. And the next one is the same pieces of fabric from that first fabric earring, but I cut long strips of it. And I used the Mod Podge glue and coated it all and then just rolled it up. And once I had it, I was kind of just playing with this shape and I just kind of squished it and loved the shape that it made. So that's just long strips of fabric all rolled together. One of my very favorite pair of earrings, although they're all my favorites. The next one is some of the same leftover circles from the first pair, but I just kind of stacked them more loosely and then glued them together with a little vintage bead on the bottom. The next pair here, oops, I'm dropping more. this was fun. I had painted, I can't remember what I was painting. I was painting something and I had some leftover glue. I was trying to mix the colors and wasn't having luck. So I was using a lot more paint than I intended. And the next day when I was cleaning up, because I don't always clean up right away, pretty much never clean up right away. So anyway, there were, I loved the way the paint had dried and cracked on the cardboard. So I cut out the circles, the edges, the thick cardboard I used when I glued it together. I ended up just painting the cardboard black. So these are just really fun, and a fun little wire shape to hold that on. The next pair is made from, in my yard, I have some bushes of just tall grasses. So these were, I had gone out and picked some tall grasses. We also have, I live in North Carolina, we have very long pine needles on our trees. They can be, I don't know, maybe the longest one would be 12 inches. And I picked some of those also, and I just wanted to see what I could do with it. So when I took the grass, I wrapped them together and made an experimental little pair of earrings, but I wasn't sure what would happen when they dried. Also, before I put them together, I sprayed all the little individual pieces of grass with a clear coat. So I made the first pair of earrings and I left it for a couple days on my workbench, and it shrunk so much that all the pieces of grass fell out of my wire wrapping. So this time I let the grass dry completely for a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, on my workbench. And once it was completely dry, I was able to wrap it together, and it's not going to go anywhere now because it was dried before I put it together. The next pair is also from my yard. It was a leaf that I picked, and this isn't the actual leaf. I just pressed the leaf into a piece of raw leather, and so you could see the imprint of, you can see the main imprint there, but all the imprints were there. And then when I dyed it, I kind of added a darker dye where the veins were so you could see it. And then as it dried, I gave it the natural twist of a dried up leaf. So I kept with the leaf theme for a few different projects. This is another one, just like the last one, but this one I didn't cut out and I left it natural color. You can see how that made that imprint. The next one is just a wine cork. I love wine corks, and I know lots of people do projects with them. And I don't like to do anything traditional. I like to be just a little different, as most of you who know me know. So I just took the wine cork and cut that to a fun shape. So it's hardly recognizable as a wine cork, but super lightweight and really fun pair of earrings. The next two pair of earrings are a funny story. I was going away to Savannah for my anniversary, and I pre-prepared some earrings to make while I was on vacation. And typically I'm running around at the last minute trying to get ready, and of course I left half of the stuff on my kitchen counter. So I had my wires and my pliers with me, but I didn't have any of the pieces that I had planned to make the earrings out of. So I had to get resourceful. And when we were having lunch one day, there was this little tiny limes growing on the tree next to us. So I cut a lime off the tree, or just picked the lime off the tree. I had to use my thumbnail to cut it in half. And it was really cute when I first made it. Now it's kind of dried up and shriveled. It's hard now, but it makes a fun earring still. It's recognizable still as a lime. And then the second day, I was walking around all over Savannah trying to come up with something to use, and just ran out of ideas. So I used the cardboard from my coffee cup and the cardboard envelope that my room key had come in. And I did have some beads with me. So that's day 2 of Savannah. I made it work. The next pair of earrings, these are from the pine cones out in my yard. So the pine cones here grow really big. And this is one of the leaves off a pine cone. And I didn't actually use the leaf, I just pressed it into leather. I have made earrings out of these, but I wanted to do something I'd never done before for this particular project. So I just pressed the pine cone in between 2 blocks of wood into the leather and then dyed it and kind of shaped it. So that's that one. And then here's one more of the same leaves pressed into the piece of leather with a whole different finding. Just something different but cute. The next pair was something I had never done before. I volunteered to do a project for my ladies' golf club, and it was involving cleaning up the course with all the broken tees next to the tee boxes. So all the ladies were encouraged to pick up the broken tees, and I said I would make some kind of sculpture to donate with all the broken tees. And I had no idea what I was going to do when I offered, but what I came up with is I took the golf tees, separated the plastic from the wood, and all of the wooden ones, I first put them into a denim bag, and I used a big mallet and I smashed the tees to start breaking them down. And then I thought I would boil them in water, and that didn't really break them down. So I added some bleach, and I was boiling this outside. I would not do that in my house. Boiled them and then smashed them some more, and they still weren't breaking down to the pulp. So I did a little bit more research and found that when they make paper, they use the ingredient that is in Drano to break the wood down to make the pulp. So of course I went back outside with my pot and I put my broken up golf tees into Drano and boiled them. And then I was able to break down the pulp, the wood into a pulp enough to be able to put it in my blender, blended it up, and then I made sheets of paper and some sculptures, which were another project. Came out really fabulous. I had a lot of fun doing it. And this was a little bit of the leftover pulp. I made some little golf pulp earrings. And then just to keep with the golf theme, this was 2 pieces, a front and a back, glued together at the side. And then I used a piece of my golf score sheet that had a little stripe on it to glue the 2 together to cover up the seam. The next pair, oops, I'm skipping a row. The next pair, I went back to the maps. I just love these Alaska maps. So these were the pieces of paper, and I cut them out. And so for the edge, I folded it and used pinking shears so that it would make a nice fold, but then I would have something to glue the circle to at the top. And then just so they can't get smushed, I have a little piece of foam on the inside, and then just glue a piece of paper on the front and back. So they are just paper with a piece of foam in it, so they're super lightweight, but I just love that little paper shape. The next bunch of them are made out of some surplus leather shapes that I had. Last year I made about 5,000 Christmas tree ornaments for the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen. And when I had the pieces of leather cut, there were maybe 100 extra of these were tree trunks that had been rolled up to make a tree trunk. So with these pieces, I just started sculpting and just making some fun shapes out of the leftover earrings, leftover tree trunks. So this is, it shows the whole shape of it with the circles on the bottom. The next one, these are all the same pieces of leather, just sculpted differently. For this one, I punched a hole in the center, folded it in half, and put 2 washers with a nut and squeezed them real tight until it dried. And then when I dyed it, the dye does not absorb into where it had been pressed so tight together. So that's kind of a fun shape. Same exact process for the next one, except for I folded it up instead of sideways. And this pair, same shape again, but it's just sculpted. The exact same shape, dyed a different color. Same thing again, the same shape of leather. To me, this one either looks like a little flower, or somebody mentioned it kind of looks like a witch hat. So, and another one, the same piece of surplus leather, kind of cut at the end and then curled up and dyed a different color. So that was a fun series. The next one, I had picked these up when I was in Savannah on vacation. I was trying to do something with them, but I didn't have the materials to make anything work, and I also needed to let them dry before I could really work with them. These are a magnolia fruit, and the stem, that's the stem of the magnolia fruit. So I sanded it and polyurethaned it and added a couple of vintage beads on it. The next pair are just some little plastic containers I had around the house. I used to teach some leatherworking classes, and when I would send the students home, I needed to give them some extra finish to put on the piece after it had dried completely. So I had these little containers to send them home with some extra wax in the leather. So I had gone out at boot camp. We do an outdoor boot camp here, and there was some moss growing on the side of the parking lot. And I just picked 2 different kinds and put it in the container. And this has stayed alive with the little tiny drops of water that I put in there. It stays enough to keep it alive. Your own little miniature wearable terrarium. This is the same magnolia blossom stem, except for this one I made upside down. And I also wanted to see what would happen if I tried to dye it. So I added some purple dye to this one. It's not real dark purple, but it made a fun color. The next pair is the same process as the little round ones that I did with the maps, but this was a book that I had picked up that is a book all about clowns, and it's just all these paintings of clowns. I think the book is called Paintings of Clowns. So some people really hate clowns, some people really like them. For me, I like clowns. The next pair, I love trying anything. And these were just the foils that, I had one right here, I must have dropped it. The foils that go over a bottle of wine. You can just pull it off. And I just rolled up the foils, pounded it, and that's a pair of wine foil top earrings. The next pair started out as these beautiful little shells. And I spent so long cutting away the shells. They're really delicate, but I was so excited because I got a pair cut evenly and made this adorable pair of earrings, put the wires on, and just as I was finishing up, I dropped a tool onto one and smashed it, and it just broke. So I spent hours and hours trying to recreate it. I have on my workbench, I have a pile of broken shells from trying to do this. So eventually I just gave up. That is not going to be the earring of the day. I went with a typewriter key. So these are little typewriter key earrings. And this is, a friend of mine gave me a broken typewriter, and it was just before I was about to move, and I really couldn't take it with me. So I did cut all the keys off in any of the interesting gears, and you can see how dirty those keys are. You can't even read what's on there. What's awesome about these is the top part of this is glass. And once you take it all apart, it's a beautiful brass with glass, 3 different colors. You know, you've got some silver, steel, I guess it's steel, brass, and the black tarnish I kind of left in some places. I did have to print out new letters, and I just printed on white paper, but it was too white, so I just stained it with some just antiquing. And I did, because I could, I did my initials, CR. The next pair, I was at a bar in Wilmington having a little drink, and it was, they had these paper coasters, and these are from Bacardi rum. And I've tried over the years to make earrings out of coasters because some of the artwork is just fantastic on these coasters. And every single time they've just disintegrated. And this time I really took my time because I had committed to making these 100 pair of earrings and I was going to make this work, damn it. And I did. So I coated them with Mod Podge and let them dry before I attempted to cut them out and shape them. And the great part of this is on this coaster, the Bacardi bat was actually perfectly lined up on the front and the back. So it can be a double-sided earring. And of course, when I cut it out, it's white paper and you could see white around the edges, but I just painted it all black so that, I mean, red, so that it looked good. So that was that fun pair. And I think I had finished this pair just before Halloween, so it was a good Halloween project too. The next few pairs are from my favorite books to read to my kids. They were Richard Scarry books. When my kids were little, we would spend hours looking through these little books. And I was at the Habitat for Humanity and they had this book and the back cover was missing and every page was scribbled on by a kid. And I was so thrilled that they hadn't thrown this book out. And I was able to have it and make these earrings. So some of them were from the cover. The other were just the pages of the books. And so I glued those onto cardboard to give it the thickness and just kind of cut out some pictures that really spoke to me and some of the words. My favorite one of these has, where is it? My favorite character, little lowly worm on the back of that pair of earrings. So this series was really, really special and fun for me to do. And then when I was done with the Richard Scarry, I went back to my painted clown book, clown painting books, and made a pair with that. The next pair, I'm starting to get into some of my metal pieces. I have a lot of metal pieces left over from when I did costumes and that costume shop that, oh, here's the foil that was right there. This is the wine top that I had made the wine earrings out of. So these were attached to a hat. There were these discs and they were all around an antique hat. It was a men's secret society hat, like a fraternal group of Oddfellows, or I can't remember which one it was, Shrine or something. They had a lot of uniforms that I had over the years and they all had really intricate embellishments to them. So I took this and just shaped it and cut out a little piece of it just to make it more interesting. And then these were the little steel buttons that were all the way around these buttons. That's how these buttons were attached to that hat. So I wanted to use one of those in the earrings. The next pair, we're going back to the Magnolia fruit. In the center of it, these get really hard when they dry. And the center of it is just wood. And so I cut a piece up so you can see where all the little bits were growing out, but the center is just got that nice wood look. So that's fun. And then we get into more metal bits. These were, where's the one I had? This is the bottom of what's called a push-up. So it is filled with feathers. The feathers are coming out the top, and it had this piece, which I cut down, this copper piece, was really long. And inside a band hat or a military hat, if you needed some plumes sticking up, this push-up would push down into the hat and snap into place. And that's how the feathers would stand up. But I pulled the feathers out because I've used those for other projects and just made some really funky, they kind of look like, to me, like a cowbell or something. And then this is just a vintage wooden bead. The next pair is another one of my very favorites. I'm a big thrift shopper. I love thrift shopping. This pair was some silver thimbles. They were in a little bag at the thrift store near me, and it was $1 for, there was some old tape measures and a couple of buttons, but these I had a feeling were sterling silver, and I got them home and cleaned them up, and they were sterling silver. thimbles, and I found some vintage buttons that are celluloid and mother of pearl, and just put those on the bottom. Drill a hole in the top to put my wire through. So the next few earrings are going to be a sewing theme. This is a vintage spool of thread, and they used to just imprint the top with the price and the color and all that important information. So I cut the thread off and sawed off the two ends of the spool, and then I gave them a nice coat of polyurethane, and those are the ends of the spool of thread. The next few I used my snap collection. I have saved snaps all the time I ever worked on costumes, and I had to cut off a snap or a zipper. I just always threw it in a jar because I thought they were so fun. So I have a lot of those. So this pair is made with some very large hook and eyes and some snaps. I love the old brass. It just, nowadays when they don't make brass, they make brass, it does not look the same. It's a more inferior mixture of metals. So these are just really fun for me. More snaps just on a round wire. Kind of fun there. And then the next pair are buttons. More sewing theme. These were just some round vintage brass buttons, and then that is the side of a bobbin, a sewing machine bobbin. Cut it in half and put one half on each of the buttons. I have also a huge amount of sewing machine needles that don't go to any machines that I have, but they don't take up a lot of room, and I collect old sewing machines and I'm always looking for the right needles, so I have to keep them. So this is really fun, just a bunch of sewing machine needles. So this, they're actually upside down. This is the end that would go into the machine. This is the hole where the thread would go through. The next pair is more hook and eyes. These were hooks off men's pants. They would have been, you know, the front buckle, but they're vintage, a really nice heavy duty hook, and then some more hook and eyes. And then more snaps, just kind of shaped differently. Those are really fun. And then still in the sewing theme, we're into zippers. These were zippers off, I had repaired for my neighbor. He had a 1970s snowmobile suit, and it had these huge zippers on them, and I kept them because I really loved the big old zippers. They're aluminum, so they just super lightweight. They don't weigh anything. The next pair, these are another one of my very favorites. I just love the shape of this. It's really simple. It's a vintage buckle, which I thought oh, right here. These are what these look like. It's a hook. These would be sewn to the cape of a military uniform. So they would be sewn on like this, and there would be some eyes, some hooks, something to hook it to. I don't know what it would be. But if you had a cape, you would hook the cape onto the back. So what I did for these is I straightened out the hook like that, and then drilled a hole into the top of it, pounded it flat instead of round, and then sanded away where it was soldered on to just really show the silver and the brass together with the black because it's tarnished and old. Love these. Next pair, more sewing theme. These are old sewing bobbins, used to be made long and skinny, and you would wind the thread back and forth on that. So I just took them and cleaned them up, and then just put a little piece of leather around to hold it in place. I haven't harmed the bobbin in any way. It's still completely usable if you ever need a bobbin, but I just loved the look of the brass, the steel, and the leather together. The next pair, more sewing stuff. This was an old buckle, a belt buckle, early plastic again, the celluloid, and I cut it in half, and sanded the edges smooth. And to me, these either look like eagles or some kind of weird Star Trek spaceship. Because I have such an extensive collection of sewing bits and baubles, there's going to be a lot of sewing related earrings. This pair is some vintage buttons, and those little silver studs are called Marcosite. And so I kept the button intact and just put a little brass tube through the end and have it kind of curled around the bottom to hold it in place, and pounded it flat and drilled for the hole. The next pair is very similar. Another pair of vintage buttons, except for this time I put the wire through the shank on the back, cleaned them up. These were all just almost solid black because they were so old and tarnished, and they clean up beautifully, the old brass buttons. Next pair is another one of my favorite earrings. These were just plain brass buttons, and when I cleaned them all up, I painted the pair because I just thought it needed to be green. The next pair, more brass buttons. These on the back, this is the back half of this button. So this button's made in two pieces. This is a piece of brass that's just painted blue, and then this piece of brass on the back with the shank. So for this pair of earrings, I separated the front and the back, and then I snipped one end of this shank, straightened it, and then pounded it flat on one end so that I could drill a hole in it. And then I shaped this. To me, that looks like a little poppy flower. Love these. Next one is the same thing, but a different style of earring wire, just a really long one. And then I painted the inside red to just kind of give it some color. Same exact thing, except for this one I completely snipped away the inside and outside of the shank bits, hammered them flat, polished them smooth, and then drilled a hole in the top of the disc to make the earring wire. The next pair, another one of my favorites. This is made from, I have these vintage shoe buckles made in France. I have a whole bunch of them. Cut them in half and shaped them, and that makes that really fun shape earring. More buckles for the next few earrings. These two. So this is a really fun pair. These are some old clasps that I have, and you can see it's got the hook, so it would hook onto the other end. But this one, they're stamped made in Germany. So for this one, I remove the bar across the back, straighten up the flap, and then use that to drill the hole in for the buckle, for the earring. This is similar design. It's a different buckle, same process for making them. The next pair, these are neat. These are pecan husks. So the shell would be inside this husk. It would look about like this. And it breaks into, I think, 3 or 4 pieces when it comes off. I think it's 3. So this is a portion of one. And when I waxed it, it turned very black. And so also I cut the top of it off. It would have been, you know, shaped like this. But I cut the top off to give it a different shape. And then I added the leather as kind of the holder for it, but also to add some color to it. The next pair, I guess I wasn't done with buttons yet because I pulled out, these are more vintage buttons. These are Bakelite buttons, another form of older plastic. The next pair are made of leather. I had pulled out an old buckle that I have a whole bunch of. I have a whole bunch of these buckles, and I was going to do something with the buckle. And when I took it apart, this was the outside of the buckle, and I wanted to make a frame for it, but I liked it when I pushed the leather through and sculpted it into that shape. I liked it without any frame. I was just really happy. But what I did on this, and it's hard to see in this picture up close, I have a little tiny knife, and I cut little cuts into the leather and make some shapes that way. The next one, another one of my favorite ones. This is a mushroom like this that I found when I was out golfing one day, and I let it dry for several days in front of my fan, and then I cut it. And I love how it gives the look of wood on the side. That's the bottom of the mushroom. And then the top stays so nice and light. Gave it a nice coat of a polyurethane. They're super lightweight. Just a really fun pair. The next pair, I just love these. I have a collection of everything, of course. These were clock arms, and just shaped them and rolled the bottom up. This is the pointy bit. That's what I rolled up to make the hole to hold the earring. The next pair was kind of late one night and I had run out of ideas. I was heating up leftovers in a tin like this and decided to cut a big section of this and just roll it tight. So it's just solid aluminum. It's really simple. It wasn't simple to do. It took much longer than you would think. And then I used a vintage glass bead at the top. The next pair, I went back to the photos. I had actually started this and I don't know why I didn't finish it when I started the map one. It's the same process. I glued it to some cardboard, cut out all the shapes, polyurethaned it. But these are pictures of my kids. You can just see an eye there, and then the kids are with their cat. So those are really special to me. The next pair, I wanted to see if I could sculpt a round bead out of leather. It was much harder than I thought it was going to be. These look like simple earrings. They took hours and hours to make. I won't be making any more of these, but it was fun to do. The next pair is made from a wooden tambourine. I love using old instruments. My earrings I'm wearing, they're not part of the 100 days, but these are actually the horn end of a broken clarinet. This is a tambourine, so it was, you know, the round edge, the drum part would be at the top. So I cut these into sections, and this is the rim where the metal ring would hold on the top part. And then these were the screws that held the metal ring in place in a different part. I just saved them and put them on there as a detail. This one is more of the pecan husk, but this time instead of dyeing it dark with wax, I used yellow dye, and first I bleached it to get it to stay light, and added a vintage bead to that one. The next pair, these were really fun for me. This, you would never know what it was unless I told you. I have a lot of these vintage 70s zippers, and these were the pulls on the zipper. And so I decided to use the pulls as my earring, but when I made them, they just kind of looked plain. So I pulled out some of the threads from the tape of the zipper and just wrapped them around to give the earring some color, and then went over it with the Mod Podge. The next two pair are made from the same buckle. These were some old 1920s buckles that I had. This is what they looked like. Just a buckle on the back, some sort of clasp. I don't know what they are for. But they were enameled at one point, and they're just so old, all the enameling's fallen off. So on this pair, I just painted where the enameling had been. These, of all the earrings are made, are probably the heaviest. So I made a second pair, because I don't like a heavy pair of earrings, with just the center bit. And those, I just added more paint to replicate the enameling. The next pair, just real simple, made from an old pair of cufflinks. I cut off the back of it and drilled a hole, and that's that. The next 4 pair are made from old denim jeans. I was cleaning out my closet and thought, well, what can I do with denim? How can I harden that and make some earrings? So this one is just, I just started with a big strip of denim and just kept adding, stitching on thinner and thinner strips of leather. So it's just layers and layers. Maybe there's 8 layers on it. And then used the Mod Podge, stitched around it first, Mod Podged it, and then as it was drying is when I sculpted. So these are pretty funny. And then same thing, just the strips of denim, but I curled them in kind of all crazy shapes. And then the next pair, I kind of rolled the denim around a paintbrush. There's two layers, one facing forward, one's the back of the denim. And just when they were dry, I put the little another strip of denim. Actually, there's two layers of it to give it some sturdiness. And I love that there's movement in these. These are hardened denim. And then the last pair of denim earrings are, you can clearly see that's where the pocket was, where the rivet. I really like those. I just think it's so fun. There's some real thick bits. You get some, you know, with all the seams, you get some thickness of leather. I keep calling everything leather, of denim, but you can see the rivet in there. So just a really fun pair. And then my last pair, 100 days of earrings. My last pair, I just took some really thin wire and I wrapped it into a ball, and then I took pliers and just kept pulling out the little ends of twists and twisting it. And then when I had the shape I liked, I took an even thinner piece of leather. Oh my God, I call everything leather. I took a really thin piece of wire and added some of these beads. I have some bunches of these beads. They're really, really old, and they're steel beads. And they used to have a little piece of paper that said made in Germany, but the paper, there's just a little bit of the end of the paper. I have some bunches of these. They were never used, and they're just steel beads. And I added them to the wire and threaded them through for day 100 earrings. And that, my friends, is how you make 100 pair of earrings in 100 days. I had so much fun doing it. I'll never do it again because it's a huge commitment. No matter what, I had to finish it before midnight, and I did. So had a great time doing it. Won't be doing it again, but enjoy.